Hi there guys, it's Mike from MCQ Bushcraft here, and I've finally got myself a slightly larger axe than my Grampus Brooks wildlife hatchet, which I've used for quite a few years, and it's served me very well and will still continue to serve me very well. But I wanted something just a little bit more versatile with a bit more weight behind the head and slightly longer handle, so I could use two hands if need be to just tackle those bigger jobs, because sometimes when you go out with small tools it can deter you away from tackling the bigger jobs that you really need to do to get things done and to be comfortable for a night or for a week or for however long you're out for, especially in cold conditions. You know, you do need a slightly heavier axe just to tackle those thicker bits of wood. It is very important. But a bigger axe like this is much more useful and a little bit safer than a smaller axe, especially when you're wielding it to split logs. But it can still be very dangerous because it's actually in reality quite a short axe at only 20 inches. And the danger is that when you're standing up and you draw the axe down, if you maintain a kind of curved swing with the axe, you can follow through and you might hit your leg or go into a limb. And there's a number of different ways in which you can use an axe very safely in the field without kind of getting any injuries, because when you get an injury with an axe, they really are quite unforgiving, and I know quite a lot of people, including myself, that have almost lost fingers, been very close when using axes and things just going wrong. But when I'm splitting logs like this and I'm standing up, which is obviously a very comfortable way of chopping into a log, and if it's a very big log and you do need to put a bit of swing in it, this one's pretty small and I can actually batten through it by just placing my axe on top, hitting the top of the axe, and I'm just going straight through it like that. It gives me a lot more control and accuracy if I'm not particularly accurate with my swing, and it's a good thing to do if you don't have a lot of experience and you might be using an axe and you're worried about injuring yourself if you're away from home. Another thing you can do is place the log beneath the axe like this, and you can strike it down onto the piece of wood, and if it's a straight grained log that you're using or piece of wood, it should split very easily, and that's a great way of also making kindling. Using an axe safely outdoors is all about matching up the tool you're using with your skill set and the environment around you. You'll notice that I'm standing up whilst using an axe, which can be dangerous, but there are a number of things I'm doing to make it very safe. I've got a very high chopping block, I'm standing on a bit of an incline, so I'm levelled up with the chopping block, and the axe is quite long, so I can keep the head well away from me, and with a bit of simple technique I can make things very safe for myself. You'll also notice that I'm putting the block of wood I'm chopping right on the far side of the chopping block, and that means if I miss or I go straight through with too much power, it won't tip off the edge, go into the ground or come back on me. If I was using a small hatchet or my chopping block was very low, I'd be kneeling down, simply because I want to minimise that angle of injury. And if you're not confident with an axe or you're new to using axes, I'd advise you strongly to kneel down to minimise that angle of injury and keep things safe. But when I'm standing up like this, I just like to bend my knees slightly as I swing the axe down. And this way it keeps the axe facing down all the time like this as it pushes through, and it stops me from swinging like this and chopping through the end of what could be a soft workstation and then following through into my limb. But there's another important thing about chopping through logs that you might want to remember, and it just helps preserve the edge of the actual axe, and we'll have a look at that now. Generally when you buy a good quality axe it'll come razor sharp, and this one came with a mirror finish blade. It's incredibly sharp, I can shave hairs with it, I can do finer tasks with it, and it's a very versatile tool. And for me, I like to preserve the edges on my tools as best I can, using various types of technique to minimise fatigue on them. Sometimes you're working with really hard woods, and there's just no choice in some cases. Things are going to dull quicker than if you're working with soft woods, and that's just life. But certain little techniques you can use will really preserve the edge on the axe if you're splitting. And if you look at the workstation that I'm using there, it's a stump, and it's an ash stump, and ash is a hard wood. And if I'm driving through this piece of wood here and I'm whacking the stump, every time I smack through a log, so I'm going through with too much power, bang, hitting the stump. I'm dulling that edge, and by the end of the day it's going to need attention, and it's not going to be quite as good on those finer tasks, and it may not even bite or split quite as well. So there's just certain little things you can do. So if I'm cutting this piece of ash here, just sitting on top, even though I'm on an ash stump, I'm cutting ash as well, and I go through, as I bring the axe through, as I hit it, I just flick the blade like this. I usually flip to the left, and all that does is drive the two pieces apart, and it halts the axe from going any further and stops it hitting the base with too much impact. And that way you'll just preserve that edge that little bit more, and you won't need to look after your axe as much. But let's have a look at that technique in practice. When you use this technique, you want to make sure that nobody else is around you, which you do anyway when using an axe. You want to be well clear of it. I'm very far away and I'm using the axe at full arm's length. So if I deflect off in any direction, I won't hurt anyone. And there's nothing wrong with deflecting off. Sometimes you just catch a bad hit and it happens. With big logs like this, often the temptation is to whack it straight in the middle. This isn't a log splitter, this axe. It can split wood, as many axes can, but a splitter will have an armoured shoulder, and it will have obviously a different design wedge of a head, purpose for splitting. This is a versatile backpacker's axe, or hunter's axe, and it's designed to do a variety of different jobs, and it can split, but not as well as a splitter. You could put an armoured shoulder on this and use it for splitting, much like a log splitter, and I will armour this with leather eventually, and that will help protect it and provide me with a bit of a handle to work with. Although it's not entirely necessary, it's just there to preserve the life of the shoulder if I ever make a mistake and catch it real bad, which can happen, and you can chip away at the hickory there and damage it. So with an axe like this, you want to be striking it on the edge there and splitting it that way, so this shoulder does not make contact with the log below. Once you've thinned it down, you can see you're less likely to touch that shoulder. Swinging an axe to split a large log is a very efficient way of cutting wood, and it relies on the weight of the head and also the swing in your arm. A bit of accuracy and a good edge on the actual axe, and it'll bite in and split the wood very easily. And if you're working with woods with straight grains that split nicely, like ash or poplar, then they're going to split very well. But when you get very tall pieces of wood, like this one here, that I've split through battening, and you stand that up, it's not really an ideal piece of wood to swing at, because the axe can spin off quite easily. As the grain goes down, it'll tail off in most cases and ping out. Sometimes it'll split beautifully, but maybe you want to make a hearth board for a bow drill set and you want some accuracy. Well, in that case you could place the axe on top and just batten straight through the piece of wood, and you could do that on either end of the grain to produce yourself a flat hearth board with a nice dry straight grained piece of wood. But there are other ways of cutting wood. For example, we could make kindling, and you want to place your axe over the top of the grain just like this, on the edge of your workstation, not like this, because what that does is it causes the axe to clip into the handle, but on the edge it will always make contact with the face of the head of the axe, and it will never flip the actual piece of wood back up into your hands and clasp it together. You can see if I strike the axe just here, it makes nice contact, and even though I'm holding it in two places, it's not going to ever make contact with my hand. and I can split the piece of wood very easily, just like that. But if we get this other piece, and I do it a slightly different way, the wrong way, let's bite it in first, and I start hitting it there, it makes contact with the handle and potentially smack my hands together. So always work on the edge of your workstation when making kindling this way, and it's a very efficient way of splitting wood with a nice straight grain to actually make smaller pieces. In this video today we've had a look at a little bit of axe use and safety with a backpackable axe like this, a 20-inch axe, which is a very versatile length. It's lightweight and it allows you to carry it around and use it quite efficiently for a variety of heavy and light jobs. Has a narrow edge on it, really, a narrow face, so it can do fine jobs as well as do splitting, provided you don't give it too much work to do and start smacking it into enormous great logs that chip away at the shoulder. So one thing I will do with it is put a leather shoulder on, a very thick leather shoulder that will go around the neck of the axe just there, and that'll stop any mistakes that I might have, because they happen. Sometimes you split a log and you just catch it wrong, and there you go, you've cracked a little bit of wood off of the handle there, or chipped out a bit of the grain, and it's disappointing. You don't really want that, and that leather will just take the brunt of the impact, provided it is a strong, thick piece of leather. On splitting axes you have a steel guard here, like an armoured guard, that goes up into the actual head when they hang the handle on it. And they're very tough, and you can split all day with them and not worry about the handle at all, because they're predominantly designed for splitting. Although you can split with this, it's not specifically designed for splitting just as its sole job. It's designed for all manner of different things, but things can be done just to protect it if you wish to do splitting with it and tackle some heavier bits of timber with it. But this axe is a relatively new purchase for me. This is a Hultefer's Classic Hunter, and it's a 20-inch axe with a hickory handle, a hand-forged 2-pound head by Hultefer's Brooks. And it's beautiful, a lovely axe. And I've owned this for 2 weeks, and you may say, well, you've only owned it for 2 weeks, how do you know how good it is? Well, I've worked doing bushcraft for a good few years now, and we get issued these at work, and I've used them at work for quite a while, and I've had my eye on them. But I've always stuck with my Brooks wildlife hatchet, because it was bought for me as a gift, and I thought, you know, I'm going to give this axe a very good going for its money, and I used it for about 3 or 4 years, and it's served me well. But I generally use it for lighter work at home now, like making kindling or doing carving when I'm out in the garden and I've got some lighter work to do, because it's got a very light head on it, and it's probably about that long. It's quite a small axe, so when you're taking it out here and you're doing heavier jobs with it, it can be off-putting. As I said earlier, if you've got small saws, little knives and little axes, and you have to tackle a big job, like make a very robust shelter that you're going to live in for a while, or a raised bed, or just tackle some big jobs, it can be very difficult. And in the colder months, a big axe or a heavier axe like this is very useful, because it allows you to cut up or chop up bigger pieces of wood to make a hotter fire with, that keep you warm. So it's very useful. Oak's a very hard wood, and you need good tools to work with it all day. Your shoulders and your arms will be aching once you start playing around with it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. In another video we'll have a look at putting the leather shoulder on this, and I'll show you how to make one. You don't need to buy one, they're very easy to make, and you can just use some belt leather. You can even use paracord and wrap it round and then fuse it with resin, which is a bit trickier, and if you don't do it right, it has a tendency to come apart. But it is something you can do in a pinch if you're out and you really need to make something to strengthen it. You can even use a piece of bark if you really wanted to go back to basics. But I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you found it useful, and I will see you very soon in another one. Thanks again for watching.